Now, maybe you wondered why we didn't use implementation of authentication API service. I mean, this class. Why we didn't create an instance of this class. Okay, so let me explain what is abstraction. Okay, great. Abstraction plays a crucial role in the software design, particularly in relation to the solid principles, which are a set of guidelines that help create clean, maintainable, and scalable software. Let's break this down by understanding abstraction. Okay, great. What is abstraction, guys? Abstraction is the concept of hiding the implementation details and exposing only the essential features of a class, interface, or module. It allows you to work with higher level ideas or interfaces without needing to know how the underlying system works. This is so cool, okay? The main idea is to separate what a system does from how it does it. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh my god, what is he talking about? This is so hard, but no. Believe me, this is very simple and it's gonna be more sense when we start using sample codes. Okay, great. Now, why we need to use abstraction? This is a good question. I can say that because of four things. The first one is loose coupling. Let me just write here so you can understand better. Okay, now let me just increase font size to, for example, this one. Okay, great. So, what is loose coupling? Abstraction decouples the high-level logic from the implementation details, for example, database or API. This allows you to swap out implementation without affecting the rest of the system. For example, you can replace a local database with an API without modifying the business logic. So this is so useful and this is amazing, guys. Another one is testability. Guys, this is so important, okay? If you wanna work in big companies, famous companies, you have to write test. You have to write unit test, integration test, and widget test, okay? So the second one is testability. Let me just change this one to testability. Okay, great. So now, what is testability? By depending on abstractions, we can easily replace the concrete implementations with mocks or stubs for testing purposes. This enables unit testing without needing to interact with real external systems like APIs or databases. So this is great and this is gonna make our work very easy. Okay, the next one is maintainability. This is also so important, and if we use abstraction, we will not have problem with maintainability. So let me just write this one here. Okay, great. So what is maintainability? Abstraction makes your code easier to maintain. If a specific implementation changes, for example, a change in the way data is fetched, only the concrete implementation needs to be updated. The higher level logic that depends on the abstraction remains unchanged. Okay, so this is so amazing, guys. And the last one is scalability. So let me just write scalability as well. Okay, awesome. So now what is scalability? As your project grows, abstraction makes it easier to scale by introducing new modules or components without needing to alter the existing ones. For example, adding a new data source for a repository is simpler when both old and new sources conform to the same interface. Okay, so this is wonderful, guys. Great. So if we use abstraction in our project, we will have these four abilities and we will avoid many problems. Okay, all right. Now, let's take a look at the example. Let's copy our authentication API service and let's paste right here, just like that. Okay, great. Okay, now imagine we have two implementation. We have two sign up method. One of them for API and one of them, for example, for Firebase, Supabase, or other services like Google. Okay. So imagine we have two methods to sign up inside our platform, inside our project. Okay. So let me just copy this implementation and paste right here. Okay. And let's change its name to authentication API, actually authentication Firebase. Okay, so now we have two implementation. We have two sign up. Great. Let me just remove this code here. Okay, great. So just leave it empty like this. Great. And we can also copy this abstract class and paste right here. Just like that. Great. Awesome. And let me just move this one to the top. Okay. And let's copy implementation of repository because we are going to use authentication API service inside implementation of repository. So here, let's copy this one here and paste it right here. Great. Okay, great. Perfect. Let me just change color of background so you can see it better. Great. Now I want to use authentication repository implementation. So how we can use this one? This is so simple. We need to create an instance of authentication repository implementation and then we have to pass one of implementation. We can pass API service implementation or we can pass Firebase service implementation. This is power of abstraction. Okay. So let's create an instance of authentication repository implementation. For example, let's define variable called data. Okay. And then let's define an instance of okay, so we need to pass an instance of authentication API service in the constructor of repository implementation. Okay. Imagine this is our editor and you know that we have to do like this. Okay. And here we can pass an instance of Firebase implementation or API. Okay, so let's do this. For example, I want to pass authentication API service. Great. And then we can call, for example, sign up method. Perfect. Okay, now I want to use another implementation. For example, in another page of application, we have to use Firebase. Okay, we have to use sign up from Firebase service. So we can easily use this one, and instead of using authentication API service, we just need to use Firebase. Okay, so as you can see, this is very simple, and this is power of abstractions. Okay, just like that. Okay, great. Let me just change this one to Firebase. I made mistake here. Okay, Firebase, great. Alright gangs, by using abstraction here, we followed three solid principles. The first one is single responsibility. Okay, so have we observed single responsibility principle? Great. The authentication API service class is solely responsible for interacting with external APIs like Firebase, Supabase, or our own server, okay? It keeps the responsibility of handling API communication separate from business logic. The repository doesn't need to know how the API works, just that it can call an API to perform authentication. That's it, okay? The next principle which we followed is open close principle. Okay, so let me just write bottom of single responsibility right here. Open closed. Okay, so by using abstract, we can easily extend our application to support new services. For example, we can implement authentication, Supabase or Google. Okay, without modifying the repository, we can just create new classes that implement our abstract, just like that. So we can extend without modifying. It means open closed principle. Great. And the last one is dependency inversion, which we followed. Okay, awesome. Okay, so what does dependency inversion say? Dependency inversion says that your high-level module, here high-level is authentication repository implementation, shouldn't depend on low-level module. What is low-level module? Low-level module is implementation, is way of communication with API. I mean this class. This class is low-level. So, and this class is high level. So this class shouldn't depend on this implementation. Okay, so by using abstract, we can follow this principle. So as you can see here, we define abstract class, not implementation. great. So as you can see, we defined here abstract authentication API service instead of define authentication API service implementation. So our high-level module is not depend on implementation. Okay, so it means that our high-level module, our module shouldn't depend on implementation. Okay, it should depend on abstract. Great, awesome. So by using uh, abstract, we followed these three solid principles, and this is so great, and this is wonderful, guys. Okay, so as you can see, by using abstract, we can have multi-implementation and use whatever we want. For example, here we used API, or here we used Firebase. And the good news is we can have another implementation. We can have, for example, implementation for Supabase or Google or other services. So this is so great, guys. Perfect. Okay, now let's back to the editor and implement what I explained. Great. So here we have our abstract class, and here is our API service implementation. For example, this is our server, and I want to implement another one. I want to implement, for example, Firebase. Okay, so let's copy this one here, and or let's write manually. Okay, here we have another implementation called authentication, for example, Firebase implementation, Firebase service implementation, which we have to extend authentication API service. This is our abstract class. This is our contract. Okay, now we have to override sign up method. Okay, great. Now, for example, here we will have logic for sign up using Firebase. Just leave it like this, leave it empty, because this is just example and we don't really implement Firebase. Okay. Now, here inside authentication repository implementation, we can pass Firebase or just API. For example, let's create an instance of authentication repository implementation like this. So here we have to pass an instance of our abstract. So we can pass, for example, implementation of API, just like that. Or we can pass, for example, Firebase. Great. So guys, this is wonderful, and this is power of abstract. Okay. So as you can see, this is so useful, and thanks to abstract, because by using abstract, we can easily extend our application to support new services without modifying repository. So this is very useful, guys. Okay, now what I want to do, now I wanna remove abstract and implement in, for example, traditional ways. Okay, so let's remove this one, and also so we can't extend, and let's remove override. Perfect. And also implementation of Firebase service, just like that. Now let's back to the implementation of repository, and there we go. Here we have an error. So we don't have any authentication API service, any abstract class. So I'm gonna remove this one here. Okay, now which one we should define here? Authentication API service or authentication Firebase service. So this is a real problem. Okay, so the one way is define both of them, define authentication API and Firebase, or one way is, for example, define a boolean. Let's call use, for example, Firebase. And here we have to check if value of use Firebase is true. Let's return this one, for example. Or else, let's return API. So this is wrong, and in this way, we can't follow solid principles. Let's imagine we have another service, for example. We have another service for Google. Okay, let's define another one, for example, called Google. Okay, so here again we have another problem. Here we have to check if, for example, first of all, we have to define another boolean called, for example, use Google. Okay, and here we have to check else if use Google is true. Let's call Google, and else let's call API. As you can see, this is so wrong, guys. And here we also need to specify which service we want to use. For example, Firebase, or for example, Google here. Okay, as you can see, this is so wrong, guys. This is a very bad approach, and this is not real developer is gonna do. So, and as you can guess, I'm very sad because of what I did here, and I really don't want to do this. Okay, so guys, please, please don't do this. This is very wrong way. Okay, great. So, as you can see, we didn't follow solid principles. For example, authentication repository implementation has logic to choose between different implementation, and so this is violates a single responsibility because in addition to call sign up, we have to choose between different implementation, and this is violates single responsibility from solid principles. And also we didn't follow open close because we can't extend our application to support new services without modifying authentication repository implementation, because if we add another implementation, we have to modify this class to check multiple conditions. And also we can't follow dependency inversion because this class is higher level module and depends on low level, depends on implementations. So this is not true and this is wrong. Okay. Alright, gangs, as you can see, we can have this summary of comparisons, and we can compare with abstract class and without abstract class. I'll share this file in the description of video so you can check later. Okay, now let's back to the project, and Let's back to the abstract class. So here, okay, awesome.